Alright, let's take a look at the first one that you've got here. So if we run this code as it is, it'll tell you something. We say aardvark. And we should, at this point, if we have aardvark, it should tell us that we have 3 A's in there. And then it tells us the length of our statement, and then it goes into an infinite loop. So why is it going into an infinite loop? So first of all, let me describe how loops work. You have to have an initialization of the variable that will be your counter. So your initialization of your counter is right here, int x equals 0, good. You have to have a condition in which you're checking to see how long you want your loop to roll, and so yours in this case is going to be less than or equal to user length, so that looks good. And then you also have to have a counter that kind of implements, the counter has to be increased by 1 basically, and so this has to be increased by 1. I don't see that anywhere in here, so excuse me, so you're going to end up with an infinite loop here if you do that. So first of all, one of the things that you'd have to do is create a counter within your loop, probably right here. This program actually suits itself better to a for loop, and the reason for that is that the for loop, you keep everything on one line, and you also, one of the big reasons that you would use a for loop is that you know how many times you have to run through the loop, and you get that amount right here. The number of times that you want to run your loop is the user length, so it would behoove you to use just a for loop for this. Another thing that I would suggest is that when you come in here, you take your variables that you have right here, your ints and your strings, and right around where your scanner is, kind of initialize all your variables in one place at the top of the program. It's just easier, and it allows you to kind of find those variables much quicker once you do that. If you want to start off by initializing the variables down in here somewhere, you can do that, but then my recommendation is that you drag them up into areas right under the scanner before the scanner. So let's take a look at some other things. This right here, okay, an issue with this is that it's going to check to see the starting point of the substring. So as you recall, the substring has a starting index or starting point of 0. So 0 is the very beginning of the word. So you're going 0 and then 0 plus 1. So the first iteration is correct. 0, 1 would look at the A in aardvark and say, okay, it's A. That's good. And then right here, after that, if user input dot equals A, so if that's true, val equals val A plus plus. I think that looks like it's the same thing as val equals val A plus 1. So val, it's the same thing as val plus plus. Now, the issue that we have here is this part right here. All that's doing, it's not storing that value in a variable. It just, you're on line 16 right here, all you're doing is saying user substring 0, 1. And then the computer doesn't know what to do with it. So, okay, great, it's A, and then that's it. It disappears from memory. You have to store that into a variable, and then basically say, if the variable that you store this in equals A, then it'll go and do val A equals val A plus 1. For this one, you don't need these. And it may also be easier for this one if you just did it like this. But either one works for you. This one equals this equals that. So it's depending on how you want to do it. All right. So first of all, put your variables up in here. You have to store this into a temp and check, or into another variable. Check to see what that variable is here, and then it should work pretty much. Should kind of work. I'm pretty sure it'll be pretty close to working. I don't see anything wrong after that. Let's take a look at like what I've done to what I showed you there. Okay, so first of all, I put all, here's your scanner. I put all my variables up here. Here's your stuff. Tell me something. Here's your next scan. Also, it also would help me if you commented your code and said things like, this takes in user input. As the grader, in fact, you're supposed to do this, and I'm going to be a little bit more stringent about demanding that you, or asking that you put these comments in. It's really important for me to see what you're trying to do. So put your comments in, and then you can comment things out like this. We didn't need this variable, so I commented it out. So this is where you're going to take in the user input. This is where you're going to see the length of your variable. And here, this right here, I took out your while loop and I put in a for loop to look like this. So for int x equals 0, x less than user length, x plus plus. And then I created another variable like I told you out there, temp equals user input. And then the difference here, see how I put x and x plus 1? I forgot to talk about that back here. If you have 0 and then x plus 1, it's always going to start at the index of 0. So in the word aardvark, so the first time it goes through the loop, say you had your counter here and it was going through the first time would be correct. But then the second time that you went through your loop, the user input would equal AA, and then you would never have anything. You'd start looking at the whole word. The third time it would go through the loop, it would be AAR, then AARD in the fourth time, and so you would never every time you found an A in the index, if like index was in this case 1 2, it should be an A, but you have 0 2, and your variable that held the val that you'd want would look at AA, and AA never equals A, so it wouldn't work. You would have to change this to your counter, because your counter starts at 0, and you did it right here. Then you had your counter plus 1, and then as soon as you increment your counter, so if it goes 0, the counter then, the first time, the counter then becomes 1, and then 1 plus 1 is 2, and then you're keeping on looking at the next letter over. All right, so let's go back to ours right back here. So at this point, so I've got the counter starting at 0 there, and then it'll look at the next letter 1, and then every time it goes through the loop, that becomes 1, that becomes 2, so on and so forth. Then I put this here to kind of test to see what I was looking at. So if we run this code right here, and we put aardvark, what this line of code does is that it'll just print out temp. So every time it goes through the loop, it'll tell me what's in there. It's going to be an A, R, D, V, A, R, K. It's going to go through that each time. Now, if temp equals A, so this time I'm taking, remember I stored temp in here. This is different from where yours was, where you just put user input substring. You didn't store it anywhere. This variable holds whatever that is at that point in the loop. If temp equals A, so the first time it should equal A, then you're going to do, and I just did the shorthand for the val counter. Yours was right, val A equals val A plus 1. That works as well. But this will do it just in shorthand, but I did it. And so it's going to go through that, and then at the end it's going to say your letter A had that many times. So A appeared in this, and it should say 3. Now, the difference is that right here, this outprint line, it's going to print every letter in the alphabet. I did that just to make sure, to see that I was doing it right. So I'll hit enter. The length of your statement is 8, which is correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then as we go through the first iteration of the loop, 0, 0, it's A. You got 1A. Second iteration of the loop, substring is going to be 1, 2. That's an A. Good. So that's counting another one to the counter. That's 2. The third iteration, it's R. So it's going to be at 2, 3. That's not an A. Then 3, 4 is not an A. 4, 5 is not an A. And when I'm saying 4, 5, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, those are not. And then 4, 5. So 4, 5, 0, 1. 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6 is an A. So you add another A1 to A, and then the rest is nothing. So it should say, and I did this poorly formatted, but you should say your statement has the letter A 3 times. So to fix that, I just repeat that, and do that. Run it again. Oops. And there it shows you the letter A 3 times. So that's how you would start out for the letter A. So my question for you is, you've got letter A. How would you do letter E, I, O, U, and all other consonant spaces, etc.? So for the consonant spaces and special characters, if you're going to do a sentence, just lump them all, call it other characters. That's fine by me. Just to get this thing done, you can just call it other characters. But so I basically gave you the starting point right here. How would you don't even need another loop anymore. You've got the loop that you're going to do to run through every time. How are you going to do it so that you check to see if this is an E, an I, an O, or a U? I've given you the basic structure. You should be able to figure out how it's going to work from here. I think the key issues that you were having is that this didn't make a lot of sense to you, And then, of course, the loop was giving you a little bit of a hassle, and that was giving you a problem. You weren't getting that. So work on this now. See if you can kind of figure out how to get that A. You got the A. See if you can figure out the I, the E, I, O, U. And then let me know if you have issues.